Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've mentioned a few times in the hearing the fact that Cuba is on the list, the State Department's list of official sponsors of terrorism. And I wonder if I could get your opinions regarding intelligence activity either being the sole purview of nation states or perhaps also activity that other actors engage in, such as terrorist organizations. And so I wonder how many of the terrorist groups or terrorist organizations with which Cuba cooperates or perhaps activities on the island or off the island, but nexus with Cuba. How many of those organizations also engage in intelligence activity against the United States? I'll start with Ms. Van Cleve.
Well, Congressman, you are quite right that traditional kinds of intelligence activities are practiced by many terrorist organizations throughout the world precisely for the purpose of being able to gain the access, the insights, the information that they need to be successful in those terrorist operations. So we have a very careful counterintelligence dimension to U.S. counterterrorism activities, for example. Cuban involvement with terrorist groups, I would say, would be useful, potentially, to those terrorist groups, depending on the kinds of insights that they were looking for and what they were planning to do. I was struck by our conversation earlier about Iran, which, of course, itself is a state sponsor of terror. But Iran itself trying to carry out a terrorist operation here in the United States, you recall recently fielded through apparently a Mexican drug cartel assassination team to try to kill the Saudi ambassador to the United States at a restaurant in Georgetown where you've probably been, I've been. And it's amazing that Iran would escalate its aggressive actions and be so bold and brazen to come right into the U.S. and foster that kind of an activity. Well, they don't have the insights within the United States, the ground expertise to carry that out. They need some help from an organization, from an entity, from people who do know the territory here.
And that's where the organizations may come in?
I mean, they turn to a Mexican drug cartel, but you can speculate about how that kind of activity, it's an example, if you will, of how local expertise can be valuable to others.
Well, so organizations such as whether it be ETA or FARC or Hezbollah or Hamas, those types of organizations with which the Castro dictatorship maintains relationships, what is the activity or intelligence activity against the United States from organizations like ETA or FARC or Hezbollah or Hamas?
Well, certainly those organizations carry out terrorist operations against friends and allies of the United States and could find it very useful, may have themselves need for insight into specific national defense information, our relations, interactions, knowledge of activities that would be of value to them as they carry out their terrorist operations. I am spinning a web that suggests that espionage is a very complex business and that the specific things that may be targeted by a source, an asset inside the U.S. government that might be funneled through the DGI, for example, to another customer, if you will, abroad, provide a rich playing field of possibilities.
Mr. Simmons, you want to add anything with the 30 seconds we have left?
Yes, sir. Just very quickly, terrorist groups are evolving animals, much like other entities. Cuba has historically been tied to well over 40 different terrorist groups since the 1960s, and their basic protocol is to provide them intelligence training first, let them get on their feet so they can begin conducting their own operations, and then once they're successful, migrate over to bilateral operations within their own lane of the road, if you will. So in essence, it allows Cuba to conduct intelligence operations by proxy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.